Hello. I've just finished the first draft of my book, and if you're trying to do that too, I thought I'd just record my experience. This isn't me telling you what you should do, because as I've discovered through the process, everyone is very different, everyone's writing style is different, everyone's ideas are different, and the process of writing is very, very different, and I'm sure evolves for people during their careers as writers too. But I just wanted to explain what my process was, my lack of process, how I kind of discovered one along the way. And yeah, just in case you feel that there's any insight there for you going through your first draft journey. So first thing is that when I came to start writing the first draft of my book, I read all this theory about being a plotter versus a pantser, so somebody who meticulously plots the outline of their book first before they dive into the first draft, versus somebody who just kind of has some vague ideas and then discovers the story along the way. I've heard people say you're very much one or the other, you're on a spectrum of this, blah, 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 blah. So I tried plotting my story, doing the whole 3-act structure, doing a chapter by chapter breakdown, and I started off trying to use that. Now, that might work for some other people. The problem I found along the way was that even though I'd written what I thought was a really good plot breakdown, when I actually came to writing it, I realised multiple times that I didn't like the plot I'd written, and the plot I'd written didn't make sense in some ways, and that the kind of book I was trying to write didn't match up to what the plot was. So the problem with having a plot outline and sticking to it meant that I, maybe halfway through or 30,000 words into writing the first draft, I realised I didn't like the plot that I'd outlined, so I started again. I did this about 3 times before I finally stuck at the first draft that I managed to complete. So I restarted the process twice because I thought, oh, well, I really like this plot outline, I'm going to stick to it, and then I realised, yeah, no, the plot doesn't make sense, I don't like it, and this isn't the kind of book I want to write. So it's just my kind of word of warning about trying to plot something so tightly. It took me a long time to try and plot it. I had this sense of accomplishment that, I've done it now, fantastic. But ultimately, when it came to writing the first draft for me, it worked much better that I had a general sense of the characters and the story I was trying to tell, and that I just went quite loosey-goosey with it as I continued. Another point is that this entire process took me 7 months. So I'd had the idea for years and years, and I'd already written some, 20,000 words of it years ago. So when I came back to it, I thought, I'll start writing this exact version of the story. No, then I replotted everything and again, started again, twice through. So it's taken me 7 months from the very beginning of having the idea that I wanted to revisit this idea and actually make it into a book, to going through 2 revisions that were unfinished, into finally trying to complete this first draft. I finally, in the last couple of weeks, accelerated the process, and that was really where I was getting the word count in. A lot of in the beginning was time spent, trying to plot, trying to come up with these really perfect chapters, and then I just realised that was taking me way too long. Which brings me to my next point, which is that the first draft ended up not looking like how I thought a first draft was meant to look. I had a lot of preconceptions about what a first draft really was. Of course, I'd heard that first drafts are usually terrible, very scatty, very messy, but I don't think I really understood that internally. I sort of had heard it and thought, that's great, but it doesn't apply to me, or my version of terrible was different to, I guess, other people's. So I still imagined I had this critic over my shoulder sort of looking at me as I was writing, and every tiny thing, because the book is so complex, there's so many intersecting plot points, character arcs, character interpersonal relationships, tiny themes. When you're looking at a finished novel, that's not something someone's just written off the bat. It's something that takes months, if not years, if not decades of layered, careful, intricate work. So I was judging my first draft by final draft standards, by published work standards, which is always silly. But I guess I didn't really click that that's what I was doing until I finally worked on a submission for a competition, which was the first 1,500 words of your novel. And I worked on a different novel idea for this simultaneously, just for something else to do. And I worked on it with an editor that I've worked with before, who's great, and she really knows my writing. And that took me a couple of weeks to revise this submission 3 times. And that's only 1,500 words. But through this process, working with the editor made me truly realise how much of a bare bones outline that your first draft of anything is, because she not only encouraged me to change, line edits, wording, she also helped me understand pacing, where some areas should be taken out, where other areas that I glossed over need to be expanded, and that radically changed the word count, what I included, etc. So that process helped me to actually learn the lesson that your first draft is probably nowhere near what the final version is going to be, nor should it really be, because I'm figuring it out as I go. When I finally sort of absorbed that, I started doing a bit more research about really what messy first drafts look like and how different people's look so different. And I came across a blog post in which she basically said, let go of all preconceptions of what you think that a first draft is and just write something that's finished that you will be able to go back to and finesse, basically. And for whatever reason, in fact, I know what reason, I had an idea in my head when I started that I wanted to write a first draft that was around 100,000 words. And the reason I chose this number was because I knew that the average sort of novel, mystery novel, thriller was around 80,000. So I thought, if I write 100,000, I'll have enough to whittle down into my perfect book, which is great in theory. But when I actually revisited that idea, I was like, that's just a totally arbitrary number I've plucked out of the air. Why am I stressing myself about trying to write enough to fill the word count when I should just write what needs to be done for this first draft? So this blog said, your first draft can be 30,000 words, it can be tiny, it can be huge, it really is down to you. So my first draft has ended up being just over 50,000 words, and it's awful. The start of it feels more like, now I've started rereading it, the start of it feels more like a finished book, because I was really taking time to try and write it well, which is great. But the problem again is much of what I've started to write might not even be in the finished book. So I spent a lot of time trying to perfect chapters, going back and re-editing chapters with plot points, character interactions that I have no idea will even be there in the final book. It's not that I wasted time, and I don't regret doing it, but I think I took too long focusing on perfecting something that I didn't even know it probably isn't going to be in the final book. So in the last couple of weeks, as I accelerate the process, I've cut scenes very short. I haven't gone so extreme that I write bullet points, although you feasibly could. But a lot of he said, she said is taken out because I know who's speaking. A lot of it is the briefest of rubbish descriptions. It's basically writing shorthand so that I know sort of what I mean, but a reader, because of course no one apart from me is going to read this version, would have no clue, and someone reading will be totally baffled, and I'm sure I will be when I get to it. So that was quite the breakthrough in realising, the word count is totally irrelevant for this first draft, because there might be scenes you include, there might be scenes you remove, there might be scenes that need to be totally redone, expanded, shortened, plot points and subplots that need including entirely, some that need removing, and so on and so forth. Again, if you have worked on a really tight plot outline before you start this process and you're quite you've had lots of practice at doing it, then perhaps your revisions when it comes to the first draft won't be this extreme. But while I've written a lot before, this is the first time I've tried genuinely writing a book that I might get published, and I've just realised that I can't hold all that information in my head. I've tried, and it's too overwhelming. I get easily overwhelmed, and that puts me off writing when I think, in chapter 3, what was it that she mentioned about her mum, which now in chapter 25 I'm trying to bring back and weave all these little things. No, it's not going to work, especially not for a first draft. So those are my sort of discoveries as I've gone through, and as someone who's quite the overachiever and quite a perfectionist, it was really a struggle to finally internalize that lesson to just write bad. And when I say bad, I mean incoherent. I was applying the word bad to myself as in like, oh, still readable as a book, but just not polished. No, your first draft, at least mine, should have been and now is rambling and unfinished, in the sense of there's a kind of vague story there, but it's just missing enormous holes in it. It's just totally rubbish, basically. It's not what you would call a book, right? Because it isn't. It's a first draft. So learning that it could be whatever word count and not applying arbitrary rules that I should follow was really, really valuable. So that now I can start the process of going through and starting revisions. I might upload another video about that at some point, but obviously I have to go through the process first because I'm learning as I go. But I just wanted to do a little ramble about the process of writing the first draft in case there's anyone else out there who, if this is your first time doing it and you're really like, I don't know how to get my head around this. It's all of the cliches that people say, it should be bad and it's better to be complete than perfect. It's all true, you just need to internalize that. And the best thing I can say is basically like, whatever preconception you have about what a first draft is that for some people it might be something that you could hand to a reader and they would make sense of and say, oh, this is generally quite good, but the characters need adjusting. In my case, it's so far from anything another person would be able to understand. And if that makes it easier for you to finish, which it has for me, you should maybe try that. You can create the perfect book later on, but it's going to be so much easier for you to edit something that is, again, not complete in the sense of being a good piece of work, but complete in the sense that there's a vague start and an end, and you've just tried your best to finish some scenes, to have some plot, even if it's the simplest thing ever, and even if some of the subplots go nowhere and nothing is resolved. That's my advice, just through my own experience, maybe is a better word. So I hope it can be a bit helpful. And again, in the future, once I've had a bit of experience working through revisions this time, which I'm so excited to start because I know it can become so much better now, but I wouldn't have been able to do if I'd been following my early mentality of this first draft, which was to try and write something that looks like a finished book, which for me, maybe others, is fine. I'm not that smart. So that is what I've done. And if you're similar to me in that your brain tries to undermine achievements once you have achieved them, if you have finished it, then celebrate that and don't undermine yourself. Because as soon as I'd finished my first draft, all these little voices came up in my head saying, well, but you haven't really, have you? Because you changed your mind on what the first draft looked like. And actually you've kind of cheated because all the scenes are really terrible at the back end of the book, you know, you skimmed over so much. That's stupid. Okay, I should allow myself to change my mind, move the goalposts, because I've learnt new information that is more helpful than the previous approach. So if you manage to do it, that is a cause for enormous celebration, which I'm working on celebrating in myself. And for now, keep writing. See you soon.